Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Andrea Martinez. I am Ambassador of Slovenia here in Tel Aviv, and I would like to thank you very much for coming today to this roundtable event on artificial intelligence and R&D strategies. I would like to first thank the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology and the Tel Aviv University Blavatnik Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center for their support to organize this event. This event is actually one of the series of events on artificial intelligence during Slovenian presidency of the Council of the European Union. The events are done in cooperation with International Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, or IRCAI. And in addition to this center Slovenia being a host of this organization, of this research center, which objectives are research, advocacy, and capacity building related to the development of artificial intelligence, we are also one of the founding members of the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence with the Secretariat of the OECD. So it came very natural that we decided to take artificial intelligence as one of the priorities of the trio presidency, which is consisted of Germany, Portugal, and Slovenia. So for the 6 months program that our presidency goes by, from July to December this year, we have 4 priorities. So first is the EU recovery and the improving of resilience, to reflect on the future of Europe, strengthen the rule of law and European values, and increase security and stability in the European neighborhood. And in this frame, we are striving to facilitate reflection also on the COVID-19 health crisis. The recovery of our economy is important in a sense of being able to provide for green and digital transformation, and also with the importance of being carbon neutral by 2050 and reduction of greenhouse emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to the levels that were 30 years ago. For Slovenian presidency, digital sovereignty and ethics is also very important in the development of artificial intelligence. So relations, if I speak a little bit briefly about relations between Slovenia and Israel, are at a very high level, particularly in the last 2 years. We had 2 very important visits, one of Prime Minister and one of Minister of Foreign Affairs. And during these visits, 2 very important memorandums of cooperation were signed. One was a memorandum of cooperation in innovation, and one on cooperation in cybersecurity. So this is a good, solid, I think, basis for our future cooperation in this. And I think that this, along with the established cooperation with the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology in the field of scientific research, with joint grants that we have, we are very much looking forward for a closer and meaningful collaboration between both of our countries. Now we have prepared the agenda for this event, and after the agenda, after all the speakers, we will be also happy to take any question and Q&A. Will be a Q&A opportunity as well. So I would like to first introduce for the opening remarks Minister Boris Andrijanič, Minister for Digital Transformation of the Republic of Slovenia.
Dear Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, dear Ambassador, distinguished policy experts, academics and practitioners, dear friends, it is a great pleasure and honor to address you today. Firstly, I would like to thank the Embassy of Slovenia and its partners for organizing this excellent event. I'm certain that it will generate many new ideas, as well as additional motivation for enhanced cooperation between Israel and Slovenia in the field of AI and digital transformation in general. In these challenging times, Israeli-Slovenian alliance and friendship is stronger than ever. For instance, our Prime Minister's first visit outside the EU was to Israel. Common values bind us closely together. We're all aware that those who will lead the AI race will lead the future. And we have many reasons to be optimistic about our potential in this and many other areas. A month ago, I visited the Expo exhibition in Dubai. There were many interesting pavilions, but there were two that stood out, the Israeli and the Slovenian. The Israeli pavilion is incredibly technologically advanced, as is the whole state of Israel. The Slovenian pavilion, on the other hand, showcases our pioneering role in green technologies and AI. You are all welcome to visit it between the 5th and 25th of December, when digitalization and AI will be the main themes of the Slovenian pavilion. Israel and Slovenia are the homes of cutting-edge research and innovation. In Slovenia, we draw our confidence from more than 40 years of research in the field of AI, carried out by the world-renowned Jožef Stefan Institute. We host the UNESCO's International Research Center on AI and develop some of the finest electric planes in the world. Slovenia is also the birthplace of Talking Tom and other iconic creatures from the world of digital entertainment. I'm delighted that my country's digital transformation gained a new momentum this year. We established the National Strategic Council for Digitalization, comprised of leading tech entrepreneurs, researchers, and educators. We also set up a new government office for digital transformation, led by me. Our task is simple yet ambitious. We want to become one of the 5 most digitally advanced European countries by the end of this decade. That is why we are undertaking 40 key measures that will accelerate the digital transformation of government services, healthcare, education, the economy, and society at large. Thanks to these and many other measures, Slovenia has gained 3 places on the latest European Digital Economy and Society Index. For the first time, we are ranked ahead of France, Italy, and Portugal. On our path to digital transformation, we will provide free courses in programming, robotics, and AI for our youth. Moreover, we will also establish a tech embassy in the Silicon Valley and, with strategic partners, an elite international research institute on applied AI. We believe AI holds an immense potential to serve humankind and bring benefits to citizens and businesses alike. Therefore, it is absolutely no coincidence that we set AI as a priority of Slovenia's ongoing presidency of the Council of the EU. We are passionate about contributing our expertise towards an inclusive and human-centric AI framework. I'm delighted to announce that we have achieved significant progress on the proposed AI Act, which represents the first comprehensive legislative framework for AI in the world. Dear friends, today the digital world is globalized like never before. AI, as well as other advanced technologies, know no borders or other limits. Therefore, it is crucial for the world's democracies to work together in harvesting their limitless potential and addressing the growing challenges. Slovenia and Israel are natural partners. In Slovenia, we have enormous respect for the State of Israel and your global leadership in so many areas of technology. There's a lot we can learn from you, and there's a lot of potential for cooperation between our countries in the field of AI and many other areas. And today's event is a great opportunity to share our views and exchange best practices. I strongly believe that we will be able to succeed if we work together as partners and allies. That is why today's event is so important. I wish you fruitful discussions and a lot of joint successes in the future. Thank you very much.
Now, I would like to invite Mr. Elias Luf, Director of International Relations Division for the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Excellency, Ambassador Andrea Purkat Martinez, the Ambassador of Slovenia in Israel, Your Excellency Eyal Sela, Ambassador of the State of Israel to the Republic of Slovenia, Major General Professor Itzhak Ben Israel, Director of Blavatnik Cyber Research Center, Tel Aviv University. Dear colleagues, lecturers, guests, both in person and those who are joining us online. Good morning and shalom from Israel. As it was said, I'm the Director of International Relations at the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology. On behalf of our minister and our ministry, I would like to welcome you all to this roundtable dealing with artificial intelligence and research and development strategies, organized by the Embassy of the Republic of Slovenia in Israel and the Blavatnik Cyber Research Center in Tel Aviv University, in cooperation with our ministry and Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as with IRCAI, the International Research Center for Artificial Intelligence in Slovenia, of whom I proudly serve as the national contact point on behalf of the State of Israel. I would also like to mention in this opportunity that our ministry has nominated a few months ago a new head of the AI national strategy. This is Mr. Moran Dayan, that I think he's with us here, but by the Zoom. We hope this roundtable will provide a basis of continuing and promoting bilateral, multilateral discussions in the fields of AI and sustainable development. Nowadays, we are looking at the creation of a smart society, while at the same time, we should keep in mind issues such as education and ethics, the protection of individual and civil rights, and the safety, privacy, and freedom of our citizens. I take this opportunity to extend our deep gratefulness to Ambassador Martinez and the Professor Itzhak Ben Israel and his outstanding staff at the Blavatnik Center for their commitment and their efforts dedicated to the organization, to organizing this promising event. I wish you all a fruitful and enjoyable discussions, and thank you for the attention.
I would like to invite now Mr. Ziv Katzir, head of the National Program for AI Infrastructure of Israel Innovation Authority, who will share with us some background on the IE ecosystem in Israel.
Well, hey, good morning. First, I'd like to say thanks for the Slovenian embassy and the rest of the organizers for allowing me to speak in this event. It's a great pleasure. In the next 15 minutes or so, I want to share with you some details about Israel's national program for AI infrastructure. And please note that I'm using the word infrastructure as opposed to, say, applied AI. Before starting to discuss any national program, the first thing to ask is, okay, why exactly do we need it? Okay, so why should the government of Israel or any other government be involved with AI? So that's the first question that we're going to go through. Second thing is, suppose that I managed to convince you that AI investment by the government is a good idea. What are the strength points for the state of Israel that will make this program different or unique among other programs that are established around the world? And finally, suppose that we understand our strengths, what should our program include? So let's be concrete about it. So here's a nice slide with great figures, right? And it shows basically that the high-tech industry in Israel is blossoming, right? It's a great thing, great place to be with. $12 billion in investment in the first half of 2021 alone. And many, many companies, most of them are doing AI in some way or form. And so this goes to my first question, why should the government at all be involved, right? If everything is so great, why should the government touch this subject in any way? Some more statistics, same line of thought. And here is, well, here's where we start answering this first question. First, we should understand that the private sector in general is focused towards application. It's harder for the private sector to invest in infrastructure, and more so in long-term infrastructure will only bear fruit within 3, 4, 5 years. That's becoming hard. If you talk academia kind of timelines where you should think of 6 to 10 years, this is even harder. Second point is that, well, AI, at least at present, tends to focus on specific domains, specific verticals. And if we want to diversify those domains, to enrich this set of verticals and to allow economical growth to extend to multiple other domains, this is potentially where the government should be involved. Fourthly, we're dealing with a huge race to recruit the best talents in AI. Israel is no different in this extent. There is an acute shortage in human capital, both in the academia and in the private sector. And unless the government will be involved and invest in this part, probably will fall behind. Fifth element is regulatory barriers. At present, there are many of those. And there are issues of ethics, liability. How do you share data without harming privacy? And we all know that data is the fuel for artificial intelligence. And so unless governments and the state of Israel specifically do something to relieve those barriers, again, the private sector will not be able to move forward quickly as it should. And finally, and this relates back to the statement provided by the Minister of Digital Transformation in Slovenia, well, digital transformation. The private sector probably will not be that interested in improvement services, civilian services. If the government wants to leverage AI technology toward those directions, again, this is a good reason to participate in change. So now that hopefully I have convinced you that governmental intervention is required, let's try and understand what's the strength points with Israel. And here I allow myself to borrow a statement from Professor Itzik in Israel. The first time we met, he told me that our power is in being a very small nation, right? And I humbly take your word. The point is that because Israel is a small nation, it's relatively easy to create collaborated, coordinated movement towards a specific goal, a joint goal. And that's the main thing. And as you will see in coming slides, well, I think the most unique part of Israel's national program for AI infrastructure is that it combines multiple government organizations to try to move together towards one goal. And it's easy to set up people together, to bring them to the same room, to exchange knowledge and opinions, and hopefully find an optimal path forward. From here, I'll briefly discuss the first 4 pillars that are being addressed currently as part of the national program. The first is being compute infrastructure, right? It's no secret that when AI moves forward, the machine learning artificial models that we're trying to train become larger, and more compute power is required in order to do that. And to much extent, the shortage or the lack of such high performance computing infrastructure is now a barrier for academia and for startup companies as well. So that's the first pillar. Second is human capital. I think, well, rivers of words have been poured over this thing, but The point is that with artificial intelligence, human capital is key. You need data, you need talented, trained data scientists, and eventually you need compute power. So obviously we are addressing human capital first in the academia and later on within the private sector as well. Thirdly, and I've already invested quite a bit of my time for that, is innovative regulation. Again, let's leverage the fact that Israel is small. Can we, as a small country, lead in regulation so that regulation will become an enabling factor instead of an inhibiting factor? And that's what we're trying to promote. And finally, improve the digital services. And the first concrete task here is to provide natural language processing abilities infrastructure for Semitic languages. As you might know, well, much of the world speaks English, which is great, but there are also smaller communities that are focused on more local languages. And here, if you want to create digital transformation, you probably need the infrastructure to allow technology to process written words. And so that's the fourth pillar we're addressing at this time. And that will be it for now.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite Professor Itzik Ben Israel, Director of Blavatnik ICRC at Tel Aviv University, who will talk about a global perspective to fostering artificial intelligence.
Thank you. First time in my life, the moderator is an ambassador. Feels strange, but this is life. I'm going to speak about actually it's called AI and R&D strategies. This is the topic, but I fully agree with what your minister said, that this is only one aspect of a kind of digital transformation, which is much broader than AI specifically. But anyway, we are in the mid of some revolution in history, which involves digital transformation. So I will speak about all of this. I'm the head of, as it was said here, the head of the research center here of Cyber Research Center at Tel Aviv University. So let me devote 1 minute about this research center. It's a large one. We have something like 250 researchers, which is a huge group of people working on cybersecurity. And it is very much, in its nature, very much interdisciplinary. I mean, when I say cybersecurity, we all agree that usually on the 21st century, usually problems are solved by technology, but very rarely the problems are technological. Problems usually come from human nature and things like this. And in order to understand the problem, and then to develop the solution, you need to understand something wider than technology by itself. And that means that here in our center, out of the 250 researchers, 2/3 of them still come from the hardcore technological faculties like computer science, engineering, mathematics. I will, because of those problems, I will jump over certain things. Now, leave it as it is. Now, it all started, I mean, the Cyber Research Center, I will talk a little bit about it and then go to AI, because this is the way we did it also here in Israel, going from cyber to AI. It all started some 10 years ago. I don't mean to say that cyber activity started 10 years ago. Cyber technology is already, there are certain states, Israel is only one of them, which play with cyber technology for 40, 50 years. It's not started in 2011, but until 2010, it was limited to intelligence, secret intelligence, defense establishments. What we were the first, I think, in the world in 10 years ago, we were the first to, in a way, to go out of the closet. I mean, make it open for social, for civil society, economy, industry, and not only an activity limited to defense and secret services operations. And we did it because we wanted, you see here the goal and the vision that was dictated by the Prime Minister when he appointed me to submit to the government a plan of how to make Israel, how to position Israel among the 5 leading countries in the world within 5 years. And you think about it, there is no way to do something secret in defense and be one of the top 5 countries in the world. I mean, you need a much larger ecosystem. Ziv mentioned few of the things, infrastructure, human capital. It's not only something within the military, and therefore we decided to open it. And I'll not speak anymore about the cyber revolution, give you only some results of last year. In terms of sales, Israeli defensive cyber security products and services was almost 10% of the global market. And I don't have to tell you that we are not 10% of the globe. And in terms of investment, if you take only business sector investment, I mean, excluding budgets coming from the government, business sector investment, and you sum it all over the globe, and you ask, okay, this is the number, where does it go to? 18% of it in 2018 went to investment in Israeli companies. 2019, it rose to 26%, 2020, 31%, 2021, we have results only for the first half, 45%. That means that we get more investment by global business sector in cybersecurity than the USA, which is the second one in absolute dollars. I'm not speaking relative to our size or something like that. We started with startups, and then slowly they grew up to more grown companies. And today we have also unicorns. And if you see the number here, in 2020, 1/3 of the global unicorns in cybersecurity were Israeli companies. Okay, that's led us to the next jump. I mean, some 3 years ago, exactly 3 years ago, I convinced our Prime Minister. I told you he appointed me in 2011. The plan I submitted was adopted by the government. This is another proof that government can do something for all the skeptics here. And then in 2018, I convinced him that the next step should be AI, because we speak here about digital transformation in a way. And cyber is one aspect of it, AI is another aspect of it, and one is strengthening the other one. The reason is very simple. I mean, why do we need cybersecurity? We need cybersecurity because we become every minute we become more and more dependent on computers. We had Marco and me had some exchange of views before, and we agreed that the development of computer technology is really what drove everything. And once it became everywhere, I mean, each one of us has a computer in his pocket, sometimes two computers in his pocket. We call them iPhones or smartphones. By doing it, I mean, we developed the technology of computer for the sake of society, to make it better. But by doing it, we created a vulnerability that bad guys are using in order to hurt us. If in the next step, we will have a lot of AI machines taking decisions instead of human beings, it will be even much higher vulnerability. I mean, you will not have someone to talk with to fix the problems that was created. It will be all by machines. And therefore, the more computer technology you have, the more security you need. And AI will enhance it in a few orders of magnitude. And 2018, me and another colleague of mine, Professor Aviatar Matania, we were appointed to lead again a task force with more or less the same objective, to place Israel in the top 5 countries in the world, but this time in AI and not cybersecurity. And the reason is very simple. You can see here the forecast of AI market, global AI market. You see that we speak about trillions of dollars, trillions, not billions. The annual growth is something like between $500 billion to $1 trillion per year. And even if we will have 5% of the growth, not speaking about the whole market, it means tens of billions, which may affect the whole economy. How do we do it? And this is something we can share, by the way, if we look for areas of cooperation between Israel and Slovenia, this is something we can share. I mean, the methodology, the way we do it. We are 2 small countries, and which means, I mean, there are some problems with being small, usually, but there are some advantages as well, as Ziv said. We divided the whole problem into 3 main bubbles, I would say. On the left side, the down left side, it's technologies. First of all, people speak about AI, you have to make it more clear, what do you mean by this? Usually people mean machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, things like this. And another meaning is dealing with big data data sets. And there is some similarity and some overlap between the two, but it's 2 different concepts. But of course, we don't have to forget that everything became possible because we have now something we didn't have 10 or 20 years ago, a huge power of computation, and therefore power of computation is also one aspect of AI. This is the way we see it, and when we say power of computation, all the ways we can increase, in all the ways we can increase power computation, starting with the supercomputers, the cloud, and ending with quantum computers. But also other things, which I'll not spend time on it. And then another, on the right downside, another bubble is about implementation. I mean, we are speaking now from the point of view of the government. At the end of the day, we would like to see applications, something that will actually help the society in Israel. And we selected 4 or 5 different fields in which we are sure that AI can improve a lot, like healthcare and medicine, transportation, security, fintech, agriculture. I will not go into all of them, but in each one of them, we recommended to have a national pilot. It's not only research and engineering, etc. It's to have a national pilot that with relatively short time will demonstrate to the public, to the government, to everyone that you can really improve healthcare or agriculture or any other field here. And I'll give you a few, these are the recommendations, few examples only because otherwise I need 1 hour. We mentioned, for example, and Ziv mentioned it too, human capital. I mean, we have some 9 million people. This is 4 or 5 times bigger than Slovenia, perhaps. Still, it's a very small number. How do we increase our human capital? I mean, we cannot produce more kids than we produce today, but we can tempt those kids to take more seriously certain areas better than other areas. We should tempt them to do or to study when they come to university, study cybersecurity or AI or digital technologies generally. It's hard to believe, but when we started the revolution in cybersecurity 10 years ago, there was not even one university on the globe in which you could go and earn a degree in cybersecurity. You could go, like I did, study mathematics and then go and do something in encryption, okay? But not, or something similar to it, but not cybersecurity. Even one university. Today, we have it in all Israeli universities. And more than this, Israel is the only country in the world in the last years since our plan was adopted by the government, in which at the end of high school, we have something, I don't know if you have it in Slovenia, which we call matriculation examinations for at the end of high school. And we still have it. One of the topics included in the matriculation examination is cybersecurity, which means we teach cybersecurity in high school. The same thing we are going to do now with AI, to teach AI not only in universities, to have research centers not only in universities, but to include it in the list of topics of matriculation examination. I talked about those projects. Again, like I said before, some of the benefits coming from AI are not, when we try to analyze what it takes to apply it, we found the problem is not technological. I'll give you one example. Health is a good example. Everyone knows that you can do wonders by using AI to many different health problems. But for this, you need to take data sets held usually by different organizations and to use those data sets to be analyzed by some machine using machine learning, etc., etc. And this is a huge problem from the point of view of privacy. It's not technological problem. People don't like to give their data held by some hospital or health organization, don't like to share it with other researchers. I mean, if they are ill now, they would do anything. But if not, more than this, they can sue you. Okay? They sue you, I mean the hospital, the doctor, everyone. And it's very difficult to overcome it. Some problems here may be solved by technology, by different ways like homomorphic encryption and things like this. Some of them are human problems, which are very old, thousands of years old, very, very difficult to change them. That is the main, one of the reasons why we said, okay, we will start with diseases of plants. that is agriculture. It's the same problem. They have a genome very similar to us. You can use AI on it, but they don't sue. They don't have privacy, the plants, and it has a value by itself. So the projects we selected, as I said, we selected projects that can be end within 2 or 3 years and show some progress. This is all put in the report. You see the cover page on the right. We called it. It is called the National Initiative. We didn't call it National Initiative for AI, but intentionally we called it for intelligence systems, to say that we are interested also in applications, not only in the concept of AI, and of course secured intelligence systems, because as I said, once we will have AI around us, we will be more vulnerable to interventions by bad guys. We don't have to tell you, but I don't know if the other colleagues know, in the last 3 years, we have problems with our government, not having a budget, things which are not AI at all. So the program is still waiting now for this being adopted by the current government, as already was promised by the Prime Minister, current Prime Minister, that they are going now to discuss it. Still in certain areas, because what we did is we used for the whole work, we used some 300 people from all the different communities, academia, government, industry, startups, you name it. So all these people, when they went back to their jobs, regular jobs, some of the work they already started to do without waiting for the government. I mean, you don't need the government for certain things, and therefore, in certain areas, we already have quite a success. You see here, for example, this is a recent estimate done by some think tank. They ranked all the countries in the world. 100, the grade 100 was given to the US. It's relative to the US. They ranked all the other countries in the world in AI, global AI index, and then you can see that the number 2 is China, number 3 UK, 4 Canada, 5 Israel. The difference between 3 and 5 is 2 points out of 100, and mainly because you can see the 7.4 mark, because we didn't approve yet the national strategy. That's all. So we are already in a good place. In terms of startups, we are even in a better place. We are number 3 in the world now in terms of AI startups. Number 3 in the world. We have more, today we have more AI startups than China in absolute numbers. Also in terms of investment, the figures I showed you before were about cybersecurity. These ones are about AI. Here in investment, we are 1, 2, 3, number 4 here in the list over there. And in investment per capita, of course, we are number 1, but this is less interesting. I mean, investment, like I spoke, business sector investment. Before I leave, I would like to invite you all. We have every year AI Week, and the coming one is 2 months from now, something like this, February 7. I would like to invite you. Year before, we had some 4,000 attendees. It's a big conference. And of course, Cyber Week, which we usually do every end of June, And again, this one is a huge event with close to 10,000 people. I invite you all. I think this is the last one. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I have to say that when I was offered to be a moderator to this event, it was very intimidating because definitely I have to be here trying to host, you know, people who are very, I mean, the most talented and at the forefront of the societal changes. So I hope I will do well. Thank you very much for this opportunity to do it. Next speaker that we have, I will introduce both speakers, are from Slovenia. And even though we are talking today about cybersecurity and artificial intelligence and being able to do everything online pretty much, and with the help of a computer, we are very happy that they are able to be here with us physically. It is very important, I think, to still have a personal human touch and to meet and have this experience. And I would like to introduce first Mr. Marko Grobelnik, who is Digital Champion of Slovenia and a European Commission Researcher, AI Lab of Jožef Stefan Institute in Ljubljana. He will talk about the academic perspective. And from an industry perspective, the other speaker from Slovenia is Dr. Blaž Fortuna, CEO and co-founder of QLector.
Thanks. Also, thanks to previous speaker. It was great to hear this story because it's not too many people in the world actually which can tell the story like you said before. At the same time, a little bit challenged because I also prepared a couple of pictures of AI, including Israel, but from another index. So among others, we do for OECD calculation of this evolution of AI and wanted to show this couple of pictures from that. If I would have a live browser, I could show even more, but still I have this on the slides, right? Okay, this is one of these animations which online looks a little bit better. So this is evolution of AI across, well, here we have like 20 years, right? We have more like 40 on the actual live demo, right, at OECD. So here you see what was happening from year 2000 on, and the bubble below it's China. So just to explain both dimensions, right, more, each bubble is one country, more to the right, bigger AI academic production, so number of papers in this case, and bigger, higher the bubble, richer the country, right? So, so you see how China kind of accelerated, and based on everything what we see, so we update this every 2 weeks. So it's more like real-time measurement of AI, and China is really accelerating especially in the last couple of years across all fields. So in a way, it looks like, right, we have three superpowers: US, EU, and China in absolute numbers, right? But we see the small bullet below, which is India. So if you look the indicator before indicators, so you can measure the evolution of AI even before academic applications there. India accelerating way ahead of US and China as well. So this is what you cannot see in any of these indices. This is measured through activity on GitHub, so to be direct, right? So India there, not just by quantity, but also by quality, by the way. Yeah. So having live browser, I could show these numbers a little bit more explicit. Anyway, so in this absolute animation, so if we move the time to 2021, Israel is, well, in absolute terms of academic production, obviously, because it's not a huge country, but still it's visible. So it's a small bullet there, right? So if the question is where we get the data, so this is Microsoft Academic Graph. Roughly, we get 1 million publications per month, so it's fairly accurate as much as I can say, right? Roughly, yeah. So we capture pretty much all the AI which is out there published. Now, in the other terms, by now our numbers, right? If we normalize this per capita, which well, in the case of small countries, sometimes this is better to measure, right? So Switzerland, Singapore, Hong Kong in per capita, they lead heavily. Australia and some of the European countries. So Israel would be somewhere here. Slovenia is not far away, but this would be roughly in the same range as France, Germany, and so on. So this is roughly the first leak, I would say, of AI in the world in per capita terms, right? Again, this is all based on the data which we measure and update every 2 weeks, right? I will show later a few more graphs as well. But just to start my talk, instead of showing graphs and praise our greatness or not greatness, right? So I wanted to have some strategic thoughts, right, on AI, right? So I'm academic, right? I'm still doing programming. I'm still doing AI by my hands, right, together with my team. But at the same time, I got involved by, well, Slovenia, a small country, everybody needs to do several things, right? And I'm involved in, I mentioned, in OECD, in Council of Europe, UNESCO, and a few other of these policy organizations. And I see the evolution of AI from different perspectives, or I learned at least this in the last 3-4 years, as long as this AI and policy topic exists, right? So a couple of observations which I think relate to whenever we talk about AI and policy, right? So, which are usually not told, right? So AI, obviously, we all agree that strategically it's becoming very important. I call it game, right? So it's a game among many countries, and the game is winning by the quality of not too big teams. So this is like a soccer, you know. Even a country like China, or they still have a team of 11 players in a soccer, right? So they need the size of the country doesn't matter. But let's say why some countries like, I don't know, Holland, right? They have extremely strong football league, right? Although they are maybe just 10 million people, right? Because they have really solid number of high quality teams. So AI is kind of similar in that way, right? So the contributions are measured by the quality and maybe you have just one team which is winning all the time. We see the cases like in Switzerland, maybe they have like 3 teams, 4 teams maybe, right? Well funded by very extremely high quality, right? So this is one aspect. And then of course, as I mentioned before, this parallel with soccer, right? If you have a strong league, right? Israel has one, certainly China, US, and a couple of other countries would have, then of course this increases the breadth and also the probability that you will succeed, right? So this is one. It was already mentioned that everything is about the talent, right? Basically, it's about how many high quality people a country or institution has. So this will determine also success, right? And the organization as well. So that's why we need these policies. Another question which is actually relevant for many countries, maybe not for the top 2, 3, 4 countries, right? It's is AI becoming a resource heavy area, right? Do only the big guys, big tech, and maybe big government institution can afford it or not? So, well, based on this recent recent development of AI, deep learning and related technology, it seems like it's resource heavy, but I think it's not true. So AI is also a lot about innovation, and so innovation and ideas don't always need these heavy resources, which not everybody can afford, right? So these are a few observations on the first slide, right? Second thing, which I think it's also relevant and it's kind of good news, I think, AI seems scientifically very complex matter. Actually, if you go into the algorithms which are run today, you see that basically mostly the building blocks, significant building blocks, is high school or undergrad math. It's not that complicated at the end. It's just like, you know, you need to, it's like a Lego bricks, right? Each Lego brick is fairly simple. It's just when you put them together, then you can get pretty complex building structure, right? So, but a particular brick can be understood pretty much by anybody. And at least everybody had some knowledge on this at some part of the school. Typically end of high school would be almost enough, right? This fact is not exploited yet. The problem is that there are not enough teachers which would be able to explain the simplicity of AI in a suitable way, right? This is one observation. Then what's also important, right? Too many people or countries are betting on an AI of today or AI of recent past, right? This might not be the case for the AI of the future. AI of the future, I would say, like 5, 10, 15 years from now, right? And today we are all amazed how AI is solving some problems, right? Which are complex but very narrow usually, right? So what we can observe, right, AI of the maybe next 5 to 10 years will become way more holistic, and will start solving problems where basically humans won't have a chance to compete with these systems. Today's AI, humans, we still can compete, right, with the vision and many other things, right? But in the future, I think this will be less and less, right? Next, it's not about, we had a discussion before on this, right? So AI is not about AI algorithms only, right? Most of these algorithms were actually invented already in 50s, 60s or decades ago, right? So it's just in the context in which they appear today, they got so powerful. So connectivity, computing power, and storage, right? So these are three enablers. And AI today, basically, it's kind of an intelligent glue on the top of existing systems which need to work. And this seems like, I mean, this is a proof, I guess, from Google on down to small startups almost, right? Now, I mentioned before already, it seems like, well, the big superpowers of AI are US and China, just by the size. EU is good power, I would say. It's just that on the business side is weak. I mean, if I say it mildly. I mentioned before that by this indices which are going ahead of time, right? Seems like India will become pretty big power as well pretty soon. And I would say in 5+ years from now. Then the last slide out of this strategic thoughts. So as we know, AI will impact society in various ways in the future, right? So we can see this through this intensity of preparation of AI policy documents at international level and also on the national. So you mentioned, or both of you mentioned the national Israeli strategy, but so almost all countries in EU have this as well, including Slovenia, which is in a way very similar. We selected a couple of other topics as the primary ones, but it's very similar to what you were discussing before. But what's preparing, and it's kind of relevant, is there are at least two international organizations. One is Council of Europe, and the second one is European Commission, which are preparing hard law on this, so legally binding legislation, which will get into effect, I would expect, in 2023. So one is EC document is called AI Act, which you might be aware of now. It's in a public national consultation stage, and next year will be probably turned into directive and implemented later in 2023, right? So this will be kind of, it's an interesting development, and probably this will be the first legally binding document globally on a topic of AI. On the other hand, we have Council of Europe, which is centered around human rights, and members of Council of Europe will also have to, it's unclear will it end up with a treaty or not, but, or will be, so the legally binding part and the other less legally binding part. So this is, well, let's see. At the same time is OECD, UNESCO, and GPI, and a couple of others which operate with a soft law or very influential recommendation documents. And so this is interesting. I'm in most of these organizations, so that's why I see what are the issues. The main issue is really how to bridge the language between, on one side, technologies, and on the other side, policymakers, right? So this is like, we are learning about each other for now, I would say 3-4 years. We are converging, but slow. This is one statement description what we are doing, right? And just as maybe last couple of points, so all these discussions about legislation, so it's kind of, I would say, in the preparation of this possibly new social contract, which might be needed at some point, especially on the job loss side. This may happen, I will use technical term, like phase transition way. So at some point, I don't know, autonomous cars will come and all truck drivers will lose their jobs in fairly short time. This means like in a couple of years, or most of them, right? So reskilling for the future is, we need to think about this kind of things today. And there might be more consequences, which, we can discuss as well. Now, I would just warn about this one, I think, chaotic element, which might be, which we might experience already here and there, not yet in a full extent, but so it's true that today with a machine like this, which costs maybe $1,000, $2,000, right, or less, an undergrad student, maybe not even extremely skilled one, can produce more than 15 years ago, whole lab couldn't, right? So we don't know that we have too many of those students yet being operational, but this is today possible, right? So with the computing power of this kind of machine, with the data which can be either openly available and open source technology. So most of AI today, it's free, right? You just go to, I don't know, Google TensorFlow, you download and you have everything, right? You don't need much. And you can basically solve problems which were close to unreachable 10 to 15 years ago, right? So this may cause surprises also on markets solutions or consequences of this kind of solution. So this is just, let's take it as an observation. Okay, I have a few more slides. I will skip some of them, not to go too much into this organization stuff. So this is just one slide which I usually use to show this semantic gap, or what I would call between the when we talk about normative and technical indicators, how to bridge policymakers on one side and technical people on the other side, and how to measure the impact of AI on the society. So this is basically about discussion about the policy documents, and all these documents try to measure or somehow structure the domain of AI in simple enough, but not too simple way so that it's still useful to regulate the whole thing. The problem is said so before, it's about terminology, terms, and what can be done, and what each of these communities kind of understand. Okay, a few words maybe about AI in Slovenia. Okay, we have this AI from early 70s. We were kind of lucky, although back then we still had communism and so on, but this was kind of politically neutral topic, and this was brought by few people back then, and we have roughly 400 AI researchers in the field of AI and robotics, which, well, is sort of pretty decent, I would say, in per capita matter. But we said before, so AI is a game of small effective teams. In that sense, we have few of them, and then that's why we are effective, but we don't have, of course, too many of them, of course. So what's important, I guess, for the nation today was not clear this like 10, 20 years ago. So all computer science, all engineering, all mathematics students had to go for the last 30 years through AI courses. So in that sense, this mindset, these intuitions are well developed, right, in the engineering community, and it's kind of much easier to talk to the industry or wherever these people are. So this is just one observation, right? I mentioned before, it was mentioned before, recently we opened this UNESCO AI Institute, the only of the kind, so which technically it's us, right? So I'm CTO there. John Shaw Taylor, some of you might know him, he's director. Anyway, so this is a brand which we can use now, UNESCO as well, right, for our AI, which actually opens doors. Globally, same people, same technology, just another brand opens many more doors. This is something which we didn't know before. Okay, we spent like 3 years to get this brand, by the way, so it was a long process, but still it's kind of was useful. As I mentioned before, we work closely with OECD. Here I would actually like if Israel would be a little bit more active on OECD. Israel has so many great experts, but for some reason they're not too active in these OECD working groups, which are quite influential, right? Among others, we are building, so our institute is OECD AI Policy Observatory, which I showed the pictures before. I have a few more. I personally was head of the group for OECD AI definition, so this seems like a very hot topic for last 2-3 years, how to define AI, so that on one side lawyers will be happy and on the other side engineers will be happy. Really hard task. So we spent like 8 months for 3 sentences, and still people are unhappy. So yesterday was an important day because we extended this with 2 other sentences after a long discussion. Okay, I will skip some of these other things. Maybe just to show a little bit more concrete things which we do, especially in the relationship with this work with OECD, which seems like relevant. There are like a couple of indices, right, which are measuring, observing AI in the world, right? So one is this OECD AI Observatory, which we are building basically. Then it's Stanford AI Index, which was shown before, and I think the relevant one would be also AI Watch by European Commission. So what we try to build with this project with OECD, basically, we would like not just to observe and measure a couple of indicators, but we would really like to model the whole ecosystem in which innovation space lives, right? So here, why this is important? Because technology, right? So what we use today, this was invented or developed already 5 to 10 years ago, right? So, the same thing, right? So what is being invented today, we will use in 5 to 10 years, right? So this is roughly, or 5 to 15 years, this is the typical innovation cycle. So why not to try to understand what is relevant has relevance of today, so that we can project the future a little bit easier. Okay, we need to find needles in a haystacks, but still this is possible, right? So this is basically the story we would like to model, and it's almost finished. So in a way, we try to build a digital twin of AI, right? So usually AI is technology underlying digital twins. In this case, we use the same AI to observe and understand the AI itself, right? So usually innovation would be spotted, right, in an academic space. We can spot it definitely, right? Then projects would start. What we learned recently, actually, projects start first and then innovations are produced. This is reality, right? Then we see patents, we see companies, we see investments, we see job market on the supply side, on the demand side. We see the market, we see, not yet, but soon we'll see how innovation is influencing education as well, curricula across the world. Media, so how media is reporting about that innovation on one side, on the other side, it's relevant to measure also perception. Media is more like top-down, perception is what actually people think. The question is how to measure this. Okay, we can observe through Google Trends, we can see what actually people are interested in, what they are asking on a Google, right, in real time. And policies are missing here as well, right? So this is the ecosystem in which AI lives, and we are kind of now building up with connecting these dimensions. For each of these lines here, we have real-time data set, which is observing globally the world in real time. So this is one simple example which you will understand what we try to do. Okay, Google TensorFlow. Some of you might not know what this is, but everybody's using this for like several times per day, right? So every time when you make a Google search, whenever you do a Google Translate, whenever you do open a page and you get some ads, this Google TensorFlow usually would be behind, right? Let's see the story of this Google TensorFlow. Okay, it appeared in 2015, and here we observe the media hype, right? So media appeared. It was a media campaign by Google, fine, and then this media, TensorFlow disappeared from media slowly by 2020, right? So that's what we like here. Now, what follows media, right? Projects. Yeah. How we see projects, we have complete snapshots and feed from GitHub. So we see all globally all open source projects, and we extract AI projects, right? So TensorFlow projects went really up year after, and let's say 2 years after reached the peak. This is normalized, obviously, in the same way as it was normalized before on that index which we saw before. So what follows projects, right? Academic publications, right? With a gap of 1 to 2 years, right? So what follows academic publications? So academic publications in a way are innovations published, and only some have some value. Okay, patents, right? Patents, the value, most valuable innovations would get patented, and what follows patents, right? Job market. So this is measured not just for TensorFlow, pretty much for any term in AI. Technically, we can go even beyond AI, right? But okay, here we do AI. This causal propagation of impact through the ecosystem, either per country or globally, right? So this is what we are trying to do. Yeah. This is more like why I'm showing this, because it's kind of, I think, interesting. At the same time, it's kind of AI for AI, which is a little bit less. Let me show just a few other observations, and then I will finish. So in terms of AI per institution, these are the top institutions which we observe, right? So China, then MIT, Stanford, and a few others, and then China as well, right? So this is acceleration in this last couple of years is pretty amazing, right? Okay, now we have still an excuse. Okay, Chinese is about quantity, but not quality. is changing, right? It's changing. Also, quality is getting there, right? So quality in that sense would be well, citation index and usual quality measurement. So the old excuse is not necessarily valid anymore, or won't be valid soon, right? So. Okay, this is the global index, right? So what's interesting as well is if we observe collaborations, right? We see on the right side, so these are top institutions. This is like the tip of the AI iceberg per institution. On the right side, we see the Chinese island, right? On the left side, we would see US and Europe islands and collaborations, right? So we see spots of Australia and others as well, right? But we see this big division. So in many ways, we can infer out of this that we don't see what is happening out there, right? Because there are not so many links as maybe we would want, or what we were used to in the science, where science was mostly one compact island. Now it's not anymore, especially not in AI, right? Of course, there are details of this graph, but this is pretty much measured and extracted from actual data, right? Now, okay, topics of AI globally, right? Okay, we all talk about machine learning, vision, NLP, right? Neural networks. All the numbers actually confirm this, right? So, and it's huge acceleration, and some interesting other parts of AI, which are also valuable and possibly interesting, are a little bit forgotten now, and I think they will come back sooner or later, right? This is just my feeling based on the fact that I'm so many years there. This is interesting graph we discussed. This is taken from LinkedIn data now. So we said that AI talent is the key, or talent is the key for AI, right? So to be successful in AI. So now here you see between country AI skill migration. Yeah? So you see on the top would be Luxembourg, UAE, Ireland, Canada, which are gaining most of the talent, right? So just to repeat, this is LinkedIn data, which has biases. It's not, but this is pretty much the only database you can get on the supply side of the job market, right? And here below you would see countries which are losing the talent. So Venezuela, Tunisia, Iran, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and others. So Israel is somewhere here. It's more like close to neutral, we would say, right? You're probably as many as you lose, you also gain. Probably you have some fluctuation. Slovenia was for some reason not in the this whatever LinkedIn sent us. But based knowing what is happening, we are roughly somewhere where Israel is in this on this chart. This is kind of interesting to know. So in changing the distribution of this graph. So again, if I would have be able to show this live, you would see this also through years, how this was moving. This graph is not static. Let me just skip. Yeah, so let me switch to AI in Israel. I prepared a couple of slides, which are roughly in the line of what you were showing, but not entirely, right? So Israel is among top AI publication per capita. We observe this, right? So this is roughly where Israel would be. So this is, we saw this before on animation. So we have also data about, we are real time means weekly, about investments, right? So we see investments, no, this is collaboration, sorry, investment will be with whom Israel collaborates. So EU a lot, US, a bit of China and a couple of other countries. And these are internal collaborations. So this is one view to Israel. Then top 10 Israeli institutions, which I'm sure you know extremely well. So Technion, Tel Aviv University, and a couple of others. So this is measured by research production, right? This is probably not surprising for you. I will skip this. we saw this. This is interesting. We have data from Coursera, right? How many people are actually consuming AI courses per country, and Israel is pretty high up. So, and this is, I think, not even normalized. No, or maybe this is per capita. I'm not sure here, but Israel is pretty high up. So this is another graph which I said it's very indicative. Even comes typically before we see the publications. So this is how much software development comes on open source projects per country, right? So we cannot see closed projects, but open source. So we see tens of millions of projects, right? And Israel is, I would say, kind of high up among the top 10, which is okay. But this is also a matter of a culture and matter of other things as well. It's not just a single number. With investments in AI startups, Israel is very high up, but US and China really ahead at the moment, right? So this is maybe, well, top industries in AI. I will finish in a minute. These are top industries, AI industries in Israel by measurement. So we see investments per sector and type of industry, so we can measure, and per time, right? So in that sense, this should be fairly correct. And maybe just the last thing, right? So where investments into Israel are coming from, right? So these are per countries which are investing into Israel. So China, US, EU, well, Israeli money by itself, right? Then you can see into which sector it goes, and eventually it comes to Israel, right? The live interface, you can change many things, right? So I just took one snapshot here. So we have raw data below. So this is, we can tell from which company on which sector it goes to which company, right? So this is fairly correct picture, I would say, as much as we believe the data, and the data is not sure if we can get much better one. I mean, it's also pretty expensive, I might say. So this is one picture, and this is pretty much the last graph, yeah. I could talk about so many other things as well, but I just wanted to make few points. A little bit of strategic use to AI, and well, a bit of Slovenia and a bit of Israel, right? Thanks.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Lars Fortuna. I'm a researcher from Joseph State Institute, and for the last 3 years, I'm also the CEO and co-founder of a startup. So this talk will be a bit more different. So it will be a bit more from the trenches, or from the focused on a couple of use cases of how to approach using AI or developing AI technologies in industry. Mark already introduced the Slovenian landscape. So maybe more to focus on the entities itself. So due to this 30 years of all the engineering, computer science students going through the AI course at university, there's lots of entities or companies that are using some form of AI in Slovenia. So the bottom is more the educational, so the enablers. And at the top, we have either companies that are using some form of AI, either in the internal processes, either in their products, or offering consulting services around AI. What I'll be focusing on, so we have Slovenia and Europe in general has a quite strong manufacturing know-how. So lots of experience and also lots of active factories that are also pretty well equipped from the digital point of view. And if you look at what a factory is basically it's a complex system. So there's from far it might look very simple, but once you start looking at it, there's many intertwined layers in there. So we have a strategy to the top. So what are we focused? What targets are we? What products are we developing? What markets are we targeting? If we go down, then more operational. So sales, CRM. So these are kind of systems that are where the data is currently stored, or where IT systems that are supporting these layers. And lots of data here will still be unstructured or on various tables. And once we go down, we get actual orders, we get schedules for deliveries, we have the logistics, we have the supply chains, so we have networks that we have to manage. We go down, so we have human resources, so people working on the shop floor, people managing the warehouses. We go down, we have lots of informal knowledge that is captured, so how to transition, how to make a product, how to do this continuous improvement in the factories, all these things. So there's lots of informal knowledge that is captured in the workforce. Once we go down, we have actual production lines. So here, this is only at the bottom, we actually come to the place where we make the products. And at the bottom, we would have machines. So I'm trying to fit this in this OECD model for AI systems. So we started with a context as a manufacturing plan. So these are different layers. So all the layers that we can model or we can get input for. And now we start modeling. So each layer has some natural tasks we can do. To do anomaly detection on machines, to do predictive maintenance. On the top, we can do market forecasting, so where how the trends on automotive industry going. And if we start combining this, so using, for example, knowledge graph or other technologies, we can create a digital twin of the whole complex system. So, and this is kind of the goal of this digital transformation, one of the goals of the digital transformation. So we have starting with an entity, it can be a manufacturing plant, it can be a hospital, it can be a farm, and bringing it down to a model that is then becomes actionable, and we can use it to automate things in this particular entity. And of course, we can drive this then to make decisions and influence the context and have the feedback loop going. Another way of looking at this is, so Europe call it the Industry 4.0. This kind of the new industrial revolution. So it's kind of using AI and other enabling technologies to improve on the existing manufacturing processes. So if you look at where we started a few years ago, so most of the manufacturing companies already have using some computerization, so having PLCs installed in their machines or production lines. They would already start connecting things, so you have their IT system. But once we start going forward, so what are these new things that we can bring, new value that we can bring? The first thing is answering kind of 4 different questions. First one is what is happening? So just understanding, so that somebody or from any layer we saw before can understand what is happening on the shop floor. So this is kind of covered by current systems. If we go forward, so understanding why is something happening. So we see the machine is standing. Why is it standing? Next step is we can see that the machine will be standing tomorrow. So can we predict that it will stop because of the supply chain issues or something that we can see from our models? And the last step would be then adaptability. So we know this will happen. What can we do to get around it? And then figure out how to push this back to the shop floor or to the logistics to make it not happen. And these last 3 things are really parts where AI comes in. So taking things that are supporting tasks that are typically more white collar jobs. So looking at the state of the systems, looking at the status currently, doing some manual inference, so in your head, and then taking some action on top of it. So this is things that lots of the tasks that are currently done can be pushed down to be done automatically. This is just some example of 2019 from US. So how many factories, so very few factories would actually have. So nobody has this full adaptability, but so that's a lot of open market still there. Now the challenges. So if you once we pick a use case, so how to approach to developing a AI solution and implementing it in a particular environment. So one of the key issues is it's a step-by-step process. You don't start by fully replacing, fully automizing things straight away. And in that, you need to first establish the trust with the end users. And this means first making this bond between the end users and the AI developers or practitioners. So first on one side, to make the end users understand where AI can help them. And on the other side, have the AI practitioners understand where are actually the issues and once you align this, then you can figure out a couple of low-hanging fruits to get quick wins and start the ball rolling. So this is kind of to get trust by the end users and to see the opportunity of how AI can help them. There is typically quite some issue with the data quality. So here is also something, there's always, whenever you go in whatever system, there's some blind spot that resolves in somebody sending an email to somebody else or somebody writing down in a notebook. So figuring out how we can use AI to cover this blind spot. So and building this positive perception from the end users. One way of approaching this is to start with a decision support. So we start with have a model, we see what should be done, so we can even predict what would be the best options, but start slowly. So we keep the human in the loop. We let them verify what we think. We let them visualize what we see. Try to ping them, not to overburden them with notifications. Suggest what can be optimized. Suggest notify when something is happening, and all with the goal that we are pushing slowly tasks to full automation, but step by step. So humans first approving, then being notified it happened, and at the end just being able to kind of audit what was happening. So kind of lead the implementation to this process. And another important aspect is explainability. That means we must be able to explain our predictions, even if the model is some deep neural network. We have to have some way of explaining why particularly system decided for something. And relate it. So it's good if you can relate this to some past examples. When something similar happened, you have to have a traceability. So for code, everybody has a revision code, versioning control for code. So having something similar for models is also quite important, or thinking about it. So how do we propagate changes to the models so that tomorrow things that people get used to reactions, and once model change and the reactions change, so understanding these kind of things. And also it's good to train, you need people on the end user side who can debug from data point of view this AI system. So this is also quite important. And just to summarize a couple of challenges. So we must develop trust. So with the users in the industry, and this has to be done during the implementation to actually have an impact on business processes. We need to educate users on the capability of new technology, so they understand where it can help them, so they don't have they have realistic expectations. And last, it's quite important also, must be, it requires having this kind of systems going, it requires a lot of discipline, so things don't start happening under the radar, because once it's happening under the radar, then things are invisible, still look like noise or invisible to our solutions. And maybe just here, so this is from one use case, just by very simple, just through notifications, we can already achieve a lot of improvements on organizational processes. So if you push this down to fully automatic process, then you can get it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it is my pleasure to announce the last speaker, Mr. Jorai Feinmesser, General Partner and at Disruptive AI, Venture Capital and Artificial Intelligence Strategic Expert. He will share with us an overview of the Israeli AI industry.
Okay. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for letting me share some perspective from the Israeli environment, Israeli startup industry. I will try to tell you a little bit from my perspective as a former colonel of the AI unit in the IDF, which is a part of the vibrant ecosystem in Israel, and also share my views from the startup industry and let you know what is going on and share some details and some trends about that I see that the last year or the last 2 years, and hope that will sum up the picture of how Israel is placed in the AI world. So maybe starting with the perspective of the ecosystem, I will not take you through all pieces of it, but of course we're going to talk about the venture industry and let you some knowledge about the IDF and 8200 and some of the global presence around here. So let's start from the biggest player, probably in Israel, in AI creation. Well, we are very known for our initiatives and startups and vibrant ecosystem that is all worldwide known, probably from the cyber perspective in the last 10 years, but growing up from AI perspective and actually growing from year to year. So counting the number of startups in 2020 will sum up with around 1,400 and around 9 billion AI startup funding in US dollars and around 350 funding rounds. And if we move forward, this year, so up to now, we are already with around 1,900 in still counting AI startups, already funded with $16 billion. And this is about the number of the rounds. At the end of the day, probably it's going to change. We have big rounds every day, starting from early stage and ending with a growth stage and IPOs. Took place in many companies in Israel this year. I think you're familiar with that perspective. I just took it from your website, I think, and it's great to have all the data and all the knowledge from the European perspective on all over the world. And I like this one, though it's by 2020, but it shows that Israel is in a good place, I think, in the amounts of investments going through VCs to an Israeli startups. And if I'm trying to cut it into sectors, so it might be different from other sectors that were emphasized here before. And I think the largest one is what we call enterprise. Most of the Israeli startups are funded to go forward to the enterprise industry, trying to use from NLPs to all kinds of automations, of course, with predictions and anomaly detections, but providing enterprises with smarter tools to use their data. I think most of them are going there because it's the easiest place to go. Why is that? Because there is a lot of available data, and the decision could be taken within the organization. It's not a government that has to take a decision, and it's not something like let's say a consumer decision to take the decision where we have to convince everybody to share their data and allow us to do things with that. So with enterprises, it's kind of the most easiest way to go, though it's not easy to implement, but many of the funding rounds are going to push forward those enterprise directed startups. In the second place, we see in Israel the fintech, which could be some of it enterprise and some of that are not. In all areas here, there is a kind of startup could be in some of those sectors altogether. And with healthcare, I think is in the third place, almost with the general technologies or let's say platforms. In healthcare, the case is that Israel is actually saving digital data for about 20 years. And since that, and it is available for all kinds of startups that try to build their venture around digital health data, in Israel, it's more available. It's more easy to start to work with hospitals and health authorities and to put your hands on the data and do something with that to gain some experiment and some knowledge and then build your startups. Of course, in Israel, every startup is looking to the other markets, to the US market, to the European market, to some to the Asian market. Israel is a small market, and it's not a bargain, for the Israeli startup, but it's a great place to start. It's where data is more available and experiments could be done. And in case of AI ventures, experiments and data is the most important thing. We always say your venture is good as your data. So in that case, probably those sectors are where data is most available. Moving forward, maybe there is another way to look at the things, but I think you got the message. Here you can see the cybersecurity, meaning that ventures with AI in the cybersecurity, helping gain security and benefit the big data around what we call cyberspace, is more attractable for AI ventures. And we see lately, I think the last year, it becomes more and more popular to use machine learning and deep learning over all kinds of attack vectors or defense data. So many of the what we call cyber security companies are moving forward and taking more AI and more data scientists into their companies and understand that they can gain from that technology. So we're going to see the cyber, what we all, as Professor Ben-Israel spoke about, the cyber industry. So we're going to see the cyber industry actually merging with the AI industry altogether because it's all data driven. A little bit of exits. So AI raised its nose with exits, since Mobileye, which is in 2017, the biggest bar here, did its exit to Intel. Mobileye, you're all familiar with. It's based on machine learning using image processing. But what is more interesting is it's the deal count, which we always see it growing. So now we can say we are in a more balanced place where there are more deals, and altogether with higher sums. I think the bars are going to grow much higher by the end of the year, and probably next year is going to be much higher. So just to mention two factors that really push forward the Israeli private sector. One of them is the global presence. I think every huge or big IT company or industry company or whatever finds itself opening a research center in Israel. Of course, it's great to see it. It gives a push to the local industry, but from the other point of view, of course, it's taking the talents for those industries, for those giants, and then actually making it harder for startups to move forward. But I think something within the Israeli spirit is running after your next venture and your next innovation. And sometimes people leave those companies where they grew as juniors and move forward to do something with the startup industry. And this kind of relationship is something very great. And the way startups can actually deal with those companies, within a 5-minute walk or sometimes within the same building. So it's something very useful and very great. So you can actually show your startup within one day to someone from Google, someone for Facebook, or someone for any of those corporates that are acting here with research centers. Another thing that, well, my past, and I can't ignore that, but part of the Israeli industry is based on what the IDF is doing for the young people that start their service in Israel. The service is something you have to do for about 3 years for the basic program, let's say. And many of them are taking forward in what we call academic or technological expertise service. And you're all familiar with the number 8,200, but there are, believe me, there are more numbers and more units that people serve there and gain their first experience, their first knowledge. And what we've done since, I think, 2017 is growing up the next generation of AI researchers and AI creators. And they are, these days, are actually graduating. Some, I look at this picture and, some of them are still in service and some of them are finishing their duties these days and joining the AI ecosystem. And it's great to see it, but you have to understand that in Israel, the effort and the data and all the resources that the defense sector is gaining because of our situation is really pushing forward knowledge, people, and technologies. And the AI ecosystem is the first one to gain from that. Of course, all the high-tech industry is gaining from that. So this is kind of a perspective of the whole ecosystem. I'm not going to elaborate on academic and government. I think we've said enough. I just want to share with you some trends that happened to all of us, but from the AI perspective in the last 2 years. I'm going to talk about the AI angle of those trends. Of course, you are probably familiar with most of them. So first, or remote. Before COVID, we couldn't imagine that we are going to do many things of our life in a remote way. So I must say that remote work, remote education, and remote social life are probably one of the most strong pushers and as a pilot for the AI technologies, because everything is digital. What we used to see in face-to-face interaction is now a digital interaction, and AI could take advantage of that. So this is one of the things. And the other thing is, well, it's kind of similar, but everything is going online, you know, from shopping to meeting your doctor and to getting your finance services. So from the angle of AI, we can see some trends and sectors and places, and I'm talking about the perspective that I see from what kind of startups are started and acting. One of them is the data-driven healthcare. We saw how the government used data along the COVID, still using data along the COVID. And of course, many startups are actually understanding the way you can use you can use data and big data analysis and AI, of course, to predict and to detect anomalies in all sectors of healthcare. And the healthcare industry is actually opening doors for those initiatives. Enterprises more and more going to what we call no-code AI, meaning that they want to decentralize the knowledge and the capabilities of creating AI technologies to more and more people that could work from abroad. Work from home technologies and edge detect and edge working, you know, from perspective of defense and also from perspective of efficiency. So we see many startups that are doing very well in trying to help organization leave the offices or skip the offices or work hybridly, but still feel part of the company and part of the industry. Online consuming, of course, and we're all aware of the rising fraud phenomena. Tried to make it more clear in kind of a description. So the COVID accelerated in healthcare two parameters. First, the thing with the pharmacy, we want fast medicines. We are not willing to wait 15 years until medicines are going to be approved. So there are going to be more and more, and we see many startups that are trying to use AI to discover and to reveal more and more possibilities for pharmacy solutions. And it's going to shorten the time from idea or the need to the time that we're going to see the solution. So it's no longer, there is no patient for so many years of drug discovery. And another thing that I can say about healthcare is that people and their doctors are now separated. Many of my family are doctors, and they are surprised that their clients or like all of us, not actually willing to meet them and trying to get their service or being properly treated in a virtual or online way or a remote way. So it's going to change everything in what we call family medicine and family healthcare and community healthcare. Well, we're going to see some separation between the patient and the doctors. But from the other side, we are going to see much more use of the data, because this is the base for this kind of separation. In fintech, of course, we see a huge way. Everybody is a trader. Trading, you know what happened with Robinhood and all those platforms. Everybody sits back at home and they want to be, and they can actually be a trader. It changed the industry. I see so many startups, like 10% of the AI startups are dealing with helping those traders to take decisions and to choose assets. AI is great in choosing assets and build your portfolio. So I see so many startups moving to that direction, allowing everybody to act as their finance institute, their own private one. And of course, crime and frauds around that area is also growing up, because as soon as everything is digital, there are more options and possibilities for fraud. From cyber perspective, so we see everything goes to the cloud. It opens new vulnerabilities, and there are that take advantage of that. And of course, the thing that I think a large piece of the working power is doing it from home. So it makes it harder for CSO to guard and to limit the boundaries of the organization, and then it opens the organization for more and more vulnerabilities. And this is where AI sometimes helps to close those gaps. Enterprises, as I said, and automation and robots, so forth. And from the perspective of consumers, I think this is the time where AR and VR is starting to move forward. We've seen those technologies for many years, and we ask ourselves, what is the need? So now, when everything is remote and the way people consume products is different, AR and VR is more and more popular, and I see many startups moving forward in that direction. Another perspective is things that I see the last year, I think. One of them is around the area of explainability. I think the huge effort that I see governments and more institutional organization talking about is the ethical, including fairness, and including the explainability issue, and everything with insurance, and with the way that we expect everything to be correct and clear and transparent. And I see startups that are dealing with these problems. So if you're asking me, within 2 years to 5 years, we're going to see solutions that will solve the problem that we are all worried today in the area of AI. So if we believe that AI is not clear enough, it's a black box, and all those assumptions around AI technologies. So we can see in the academic some efforts, but we also see some startups to take the step forward and try to solve it technically, meaning that it is not going to be an issue within a few years. The other side of it is the data privacy, the private data, those consumers' data, which we want to maintain as private, but also all the data available in the world. So there are some technologies that are trying to put everything in place and to guard the privacy from one side, but also allowing the machine to learn and to make better use of the data. So there are solutions. Again, I see that within a few years, it's not going to be an issue. It's going to be a solved issue. And another trend that I see is around the decentralized learning network, meaning that you don't want to put all the data in one place in order to learn and to train your models. There are technologies to do it in a decentralized way, or on the edge, depends on the case. It's all very early stages, but also within a few years, we're going to see it done all over the place. Every piece of technology is going to have some machine learning or deep learning or other learning ways running all in the background. So this is all about, I think, the Israeli ecosystem. And thank you for your time, patience.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. And as I promised the Q&A session at the end, I would like to open the floor and ask maybe somebody has a question for any of the speakers.
Sorry, yeah. So I was just trying to say that, yeah, there's so many biases in the data itself, but even if everything would be fine on the data side, it's still sometimes hard to isolate the AI versus something which would be non-AI, right? Or it's kind of disputable. Is this AI, or is this statistics, or it's, I don't know, control theory, or it's computational linguistics, and so on. We try to be a little bit over-inclusive, to be not to miss things. So what we would say, so we go towards recall, not so much precision. Sometimes can suffer, right? But we try to capture everything what seems like, smells like AI, right? So this is this OECD approach, right?
Thank you very much. Again, I would like to thank all the speakers, to Minister Andrijanič and to Director Elias Luf, also of course to Professor Ben Israel, Ambassador Sela, for all the support, and all the team of Tel Aviv University, of course, who made this happen. I would like to thank you for this informative and very interesting session. I hope that you all enjoyed it, and we will continue cooperating in this, and hopefully the artificial intelligence will be something that will bring our countries together also in the future, and we will have some more interesting projects together. Thank you very much. Bye.